to the Actual Tech Media EcoCast. My name is Jess, and I am excited to be here with you all today. But before we jump into our content, I have some basic information that I want to cover with you. All right, let's kick off our day here today by taking a quick tour of your audience console. And we're going to start with the questions window. So if you haven't already said hi, there is a whole audience of cool humans out there, so reach out and give a wave to the other members of the Actual Tech Media community. Now, keep in mind that if you do have any technical issues today, a browser refresh is going to fix just about anything. But if those tech gremlins are clinging on today, no problem. Just throw a comment in the question section and our crew will be there to help. We also want this to be an informative webinar for you, so throughout today's EcoCast, we hope you'll get engaged and ask all your burning questions. Not only will we have team members responding to you over a live chat, we will also have a dedicated Q&A session at the end of our presentations. Now, if we don't get to your question during the live webinar today, don't worry, because the awesome experts that we have here with us will be following up after we wrap. All right, next up, there's going to be lots of cool aha moments on the EcoCast today. And if you want to share those with your community, we've made it nice and easy for you. You can use the Twitter button right there in your audience console, and the hashtag for today's EcoCast will be automatically added to your post. All right, our last stop on this guided tour, be sure to check out the handouts tab for some awesome resources and takeaways from our speakers here today. We have an info pack collection, solution briefs, white papers, data sheets, free trials, ebooks, upcoming webinars, and more. So many great resources, so be sure to go explore. Now, if that wasn't enough fun, we also have some exciting prizes that we'll be giving away throughout today's EcoCast. I'm going to tell you a bit more about those later on, but a few quick reminders for you all. First, you do need to be here live in attendance at the EcoCast in order to qualify to win a prize, and we will follow up with all of you after we wrap. Now, all winners must submit an IRS Form W-9 to Actual Tech Media, and all winners must meet the Actual Tech Media prize terms and conditions. Now, if you don't know what those full T's and C's are, that's fine. We've got the full thing for you. Just head on over to that handouts tab, click in, scroll down to the bottom, and you'll find them waiting for you there. Now, the absolute most important thing to remember is that we love getting all your insightful questions during these live webinars. In fact, we love it so much that we actually have a special additional prize for all you inquisitive folks out there. So in today's EcoCast, we will be giving away a prize for the best question asked in each of our live sessions. Now, the expert speakers and teams will review all questions asked after we wrap the webinar, which means that even if your question does not get read out in a live session, there is still a chance to win. If you are a lucky winner here today and you would like to donate the value of your prize, we have several wonderful organizations that we partner with. So let us know when we follow up about your big win, and we'll get that rolling for you. Again, we are so happy to have you all here with us live at the EcoCast today, and we want to keep that good feeling going, so let's connect on social media. Reach out and connect with Actual Tech Media on Twitter and on LinkedIn. We have lots of great content, and we always want to hear from you. Now, if you're looking for more awesome content and resources right after we wrap the EcoCast today, be sure to subscribe to the Actual Tech Media channel on YouTube. Another fun way to win a prize and, hey, grow this awesome community is to refer an industry friend or a coworker to the Actual Tech Media webinar series. Now, you'll find a link to do that right in your handouts tab, and you will also be automatically redirected at the end of the webinar. And both you and your coworker or friend could win a prize, and we hold those drawings every month. So be sure to refer a friend because, it could quite literally be a win-win situation. Next, we have a cool opportunity for all the decision makers out there to get connected with new and emerging tech and innovative vendors. Here's how it works. All you need to do is click on the link in your handouts tab, fill out a quick application, and the Actual Tech crew will then match you with some vendors that we think you should probably be chatting with based on your needs. There will also be fun opportunities that you get to choose to join in, like surveys, test runs, new solutions, extended demos, and so on. You'll get some chances to win extra prizes, you'll chat with great people, and you'll learn about the hottest new trends in tech. So be sure to apply, or hey, send that link to a decision maker on your team. Now, I want to take a quick minute here to remind you all about one of my favorite resources, and that is ransomware.org. You can find out everything you need to know about ransomware, how to prepare, prevent, and recover. This site is jam-packed with information, helpful tips, checklists, strategic approaches, case studies, everything you need in one place. So wherever you are in your ransomware preparedness journey, there is something for you at ransomware.org. Go check it out and start exploring. All right, I have one more exciting resource I have to tell you about today, and that is the Gorilla Guide Book Club. It's going to give you access to free enterprise IT books authored by top industry experts, so you can stay up to date on trending enterprise technology. And yes, these books will work on your Kindle, your mobile device, and as I said, they are completely free. You can download these awesome resources at gorilla.guide, and there's a link for you in that handouts tab as well. All right, well, we have covered a lot of important things already, and I don't know about you all, but I am excited to dive in. So let's get going.
And to echo Jess, welcome everybody. We're here for the Actual Tech Media EcoCast on monitoring and optimizing a hybrid cloud. This is going to be a great day of sessions from hybrid cloud innovators and thought leaders, including Synology, Pure Storage, AppDynamics, and Progress. I really can't wait to hear from all the experts in each of these sessions. My name is Scott Becker, and like Jess, I'm one of the Actual Tech moderators along with Keith Ward, and we're delighted to be bringing you this event today. Jess already went through how the prizes work. Let's talk about what the prizes are. So what we've got for you today is 3 chances to win a $300 Amazon gift card. So just in time for some beach gear or road trip equipment ahead of any summer plans. So hang tight for those prize drawings. And of course, you've also got those 4 opportunities to win that $50 best question prize during each of the sessions. Now we're going to have a lot of great sessions today about hybrid cloud. But for our keynote, I'm going to go on a little tangent and talk about your job roles. So it's closely related because cloud and hybrid are really driving changes in the way we all do IT. You know, one of the things we've been really interested in here at Actual Tech Media is how all of your job roles and your job titles are changing with that onset of cloud. So to that end, there's some new research released in the last week by the industry luminaries at IDC, and we want to do a quick gut check with all of you to see if those job role changes that they're reporting sort of resonate with what you're experiencing in your organizations. So in this keynote, I'm going to talk briefly about the research, but we're also going to intersperse it with some polls to get your takes. So what I'm showing here is a key quote from the report. This comes from Al Gillen, who's one of the lead analysts over at IDC. He's actually the guy who hired me into my first technology reporting job 25 years ago and is still one of the most astute observers of the IT industry that I've ever run into. And Al says that we're in the midst of a once-in-a-generation shift in the composition of the IT workforce. He's saying what we're going through now is on par with the emergence of the internet all the way back in the dot-com era when there was an explosion in IT roles like web developers and network engineers. So that report is called the Worldwide XOps Census and Forecast, and X, of course, is like the algebra symbol for anything, ops is for operations. So we've all seen DevOps and variations there. IDC is sort of doubling down on that with their new role definitions. So let's talk about the roles that IDC is saying are emerging. And I'm going to ask for your help in paying close attention to these definitions as I go through them, and really listen for one that sounds like what you're doing these days or what you're starting to be asked to do or sort of expected to be asked to do. Because right after this, I'm going to put up a poll and ask you which of these roles, if any, describes your role, your job. So here are the 8 roles, along with IDC's definitions for each one. So data ops, that uses a combination of technologies and methods with a focus on quality for consistent and continuous delivery of data value, combining integrated and process-oriented perspectives on data with automation and methods analogous to agile software engineering. So that's data ops. DevOps, of course, uses collaborative agile approaches paired with extensive automation development pipelines, testing, infrastructure configuration, provisioning, security controls, and lifecycle continuous integration for continuous development and continuous delivery. Next one is one I'm sure everybody's heard of as well, DevSecOps. This uses a methodology that asserts that security needs to be prioritized at the beginning of the DevOps delivery pipeline. It enables DevOps teams collaborating with security to act as key stakeholders in defining and implementing security policies. Next up, IT Ops uses technology and methods to provide routine, scheduled tasks, and unscheduled report activities related to IT systems. IT ops professionals may spend as much as 50% of their time engaged with business users in support, the elicitation of requirements, and performing contingent or secondary business tasks. So that was IT ops. ML ops uses technology and processes to streamline and automate the entire machine learning life cycle. So the key capabilities include managing and automating ML data and pipelines, ML code and ML models from data ingestion to model deployment, tracking, and monitoring. ML ops uses similar principles to DevOps practices applied to machine learning processes. Next up, platform engineering. So platform engineering is a discipline of designing and building tool chains and workflows that enable self-service capabilities focused on managing and optimizing the software delivery process to deploy applications and services to cloud platforms. After that, we have site reliability engineering, SRE, which includes software engineers who build scripts to automate IT operation tasks such as maintenance and support. To enable efficiency and reliability, SRE teams also fix operational bugs and remove manual work and rote tasks. And the last one here on our list is systems administrators, which is a term that's been around in IT for decades. Systems administrators configure, maintain, and support computer systems and systems of systems using a variety of tools and methods appropriate to the system or systems of systems in use. They may spend as much as 50% of their time engaged with business users in defining key requirements, business goals, and adaptations to maintain fit for use and fit for purpose. Okay, so I hope some of those, or maybe one of those, fit you, or I don't hope, I'm just interested to hear. So it's going to be your turn. So we've got the poll up here. Do any of these fit? If any of those first 8 definitions fit, please mark that one. If none of those categories is a fit for what you do, we've got an item for you there. That one's sort of for IT professionals. And then we've got one that's developer, but none of the roles above fit what I do. And then finally, there's a management or C-level category. So if you oversee several of the kind of departments listed above or the functions listed above, go ahead and click on those. So I'm going to leave that open here. We've got a lot of sysadmins. That's sort of leading the pack at the moment. Also some, a fair amount of IT ops. Some of the other categories coming in as well. And just while I leave that up there, in IDC's report, they did, some compound annual growth, for these categories over the 5-year period that they're studying, which is, or projecting for, which is 2022 to 2027. And they thought IT operations would decline by about 8% over that period. Systems administrators, also about an 8% decline. Where they're seeing real opportunity for growth is in the data ops job role, up about 18%, but that's from a small base. And ML ops up about 20% from a small base. DevSecOps, they're expecting double-digit growth, in that job title. And DevOps has been hot, but it'll be muted somewhat over the next 5 years by the growth in platform engineering roles. Okay, so let's take let me just tell you about what we're seeing here. So right now we've got a bunch of responses in. Thank you so much for everybody to everybody who has put an answer in here. It looks like systems administrators is leading the pack at about 30%. IT ops is at 21%, and that was that one where it's kind of similar to systems administrator, but slightly newer. And then let's see. After that, probably our next biggest category is none of these categories is quite a fit for what I do. And feel free to drop additional categories in there if you have one that you're not seeing. Paul mentions that AI ops will be a category that fits in that list too someday. Thanks for the feedback, Paul. We've also got a little bit of DevSecOps and some platform engineering too. Okay. So let's move on to another question, which is sort of a gut check question. We're wondering if these categories reflect what's happening in your IT department, now. So this question is, how would you describe your IT department structure? Are you, still finding that the sort of the IT dev model for departmental structure and titles is working? Are you evolving toward incorporating some of these newer categories that we're talking about here, the DevOps, the DevSecOps, and other XOps? Or are these XOps categories really describing how you're running your functions today in your organization? So I'll leave this question open for a minute. And see what we're getting. So right now it's pretty neck and neck between people finding that the sort of, I'll call it traditional model, of IT/dev for departmental structure is working, and about the same for people evolving, toward some of these newer categories. Really interesting to see that even split there, and then we've got a smaller group, but about 10% is saying those XOps categories really describe how they're running their IT function now. All right, well, thanks for all your feedback on these job categories. We know things are changing, and it's really interesting to hear what you're seeing. Hopefully this will give you some ideas about how your peer organizations are handling this huge cloud transition that's going on right now. And for the rest of the session today, we'll be looking at the powerful hybrid cloud technologies that are helping to drive changes in the way organizations run their IT worldwide. So one final poll for you, and this is the standard poll that we do at the beginning of all these events, related to hybrid cloud. What's your time frame for adding new or updating existing IT solutions at your company? So the categories there are less than 6 months, 6 months to a year to 2 years, and not sure. So we'll just leave that up there for a minute, and then we are going to get right into our first session. Okay. Well, thanks everybody for the response to this survey and all the other surveys that we've put out this morning. I know we're keeping you busy, or this afternoon, depending on your time frame. But really appreciate your engagement here. Okay. Well, it is time for our first presentation in the Hybrid Cloud EcoCast. This session comes from Synology, and presenting for Synology is Mark Anthony Mananang, who's Technical Account Manager there. So Mark, thanks for being here. I will turn things over to you.
Hello everyone, thank you for joining today's webinar going over hybrid cloud storage. My name is Mark Anthony, one of the Technical Account Managers here at Synology, based out of our Bellevue office in Washington, where we have a lot of conversations about file syncing for distributed teams. In other words, for hybrid or remote environments, which has been more prevalent within the last couple of years. So we'll go ahead and look at what that solution looks like, and I'm excited to go ahead and talk to you guys about that today. For those of you that are not familiar with Synology, what we do is we help people and organizations manage, share, and protect their data through a lot of the different solutions that we provide, not only with our hardware. A lot of our overall functionality is also centered along with our software solutions that we provide that really fit a lot of different sizes, whether it be an individual or a full-on corporation or organization, whatever vertical that you are currently in. For today, we'll be looking at how Synology, how we're able to unify the two different storage platforms that are available to companies and the two different storage platforms that make up a hybrid cloud environment. We'll look at how we can use the scalability and cross-site syncing of cloud storage, of course, how that can be used in tandem with the fast local speeds of on-prem storage. To give you an example of what on-prem storage looks like, we'll get into cloud storage later, but I wanted to go ahead and give you an example through a company called BBC Media Action, that I'm sure a few of you may be familiar with. That they are a video content production house that is global, that has teams all around the world, specifically 16 offices or more since we last talked with them. But essentially, they came to Synology with a couple of different challenges to kind of paint the picture. Their overall data workflow and collaboration was primarily centered around portable USB drives, which posed them a couple of problems, right? Their remote team started needing more local storage just because of the limitation of those external drives, and working with those external drives also made collaboration difficult and complex overall. There was also a particular occasion where months of work were lost, unfortunately, in an office fire, as they had no backup and recovery plan in place at the time. The last challenge they presented to us was that their main office in London really had no way to review or preview the footage that all of these remote branches and locations were shooting day in and day out. So the solution that we provided to them really was that we were able to get one of these 8-bay NAS solutions deployed at each of their branches or each at their remote locations, where they would essentially store all of their video project files on. And through the local network, they would have all of their editors grant access to those specific video files rather than through external USBs, which made overall accessibility and collaboration a lot easier, as they were just working through the files over the network, which was a huge improvement, just as with the exchanging of USB drives, things like that. They're prone to kind of hardware failure, or essentially things would get mixed up, accidentally deleted, all of those things. So this was definitely an overall improvement, and kind of simplified their overall workflow at each of the branches. Now, for the visibility for HQ, we were able to also alleviate that challenge that they were facing, and to also ensure that they were protected if they experienced something of a site loss, as the fire, as I mentioned before, where they would be able to see all of the files from all of the branches in their centralized hub in London. All of that data would also be protected. They would also be able to view and see the current status of all the projects, get reviews that way. So it was really a great solution for them, and to kind of revisit just the overall benefits of this solution. All of the local branches had that fast local storage that was easily expandable in regards to the growing data needs in correspondence with the large video assets that they were shooting in day out for their projects. They had easy backup and recovery, sending that over to their HQ, which would then grant HQ the overall visibility that they need in terms of real-time updates throughout the organization, really. Now, we've covered the on-prem storage of a hybrid cloud environment, but now let's go ahead and kind of present a situation where, what if the teams needed multi-directional sync, kind of painting that picture where a hybrid cloud environment would be essentially really advantageous. Let's say one branch needed access to specific files on projects from a different branch across the country, or in a different country altogether in this particular case. If a branch needed certain files but not all the files, what would that look like, or how would that change their environment overall? One option that is open to a lot of different companies that are facing the same challenge or wanting to be able to solve the same problem is something called traditional sync. This would sync all the data that is collected and stored in London, for this case, and sync that data to all the remote branches across the organization. Sounds simple enough. However, this means that each remote branch would essentially have to take into account more of that storage. They would need to upgrade their units to account for that storage, and also bandwidth, since we would have to also sync, the changes from one branch. If data was being changed from one branch to another branch, there would be a lot of syncing happening all at the same time, which would be very costly to upgrade those local units to larger sizes, upgrading their network backbone, which is also very time consuming as well. So this is where we go into a better and more cost-effective solution, which would be implementing what we here at Synology call hybrid share. Hybrid share is a software that utilizes Synology's own C2 cloud service and pairs it together with the units that you already have deployed on-prem. Now, what that looks like in an environment is that your data, your folders, would primarily be stored in the cloud, right? And we would have all of the remote branches, as you can see by the diagram. All of those remote branches would then be able to view and see all of those folders without having to download them or having to take into account the storage that all of those folders in the cloud take up. So what you're able to do, and what's great, is that you can sync files on demand to certain branches, pull on files that you would need at one branch but you don't need at another, free up space that way, giving visibility not only to your HQ but also the whole entire organization. This really gives you the best of both public cloud and also the private cloud, which is essentially your NAS environment that you have deployed, those local units. You could get that fast local access where you could see everything in one portal, whether it be the files that are stored locally at your branch, but also the files that you need to collaborate with another branch, and access all of that quickly and without the need to expand storage locally at each individual site. So there is a reduced footprint overall across your organization, which is also going to really save you money since you're not having to buy a lot of hardware across the board. And through the ease and scalability of cloud storage, you can increase that storage capacity again without needing to buy more and more hardware. So what I'd like to do today is kind of show you how we would be able to leverage C2 storage, what that looks like in setting up on the cloud side, and how we can go ahead and get that connected on an on-prem unit itself. So let me go ahead and change windows now for you. To go ahead and start the process, we're going to go ahead and log into our C2 account. I'm going to go ahead and enter the credentials that correspond with our C2 account. Okay, and when we log in here, you're going to go ahead and notice that this is the overall dashboard that you're going to go ahead and see when you're in your C2 account. See settings like managing your credentials, subscription payment, domain information, things like that. But we're going to go ahead and go to the top right here, click on this icon for C2 services, and choose storage. As you can see, there are also the other C2 services that we provide as well. Wait for that to go ahead and load. And immediately the first thing that you are going to notice is that it calls out exactly how much storage you are using in this specific C2 account. And then if you look on the left, this is the overall dashboard. Right now, there's currently nothing configured in this C2 account, but you can set aside a specific amount, not only for hybrid share, but also another application that we use, which is hyper backup. If you want to go ahead and learn what that is, there's going to be a section where I call that out at the end. But we're going to go ahead and choose hybrid share here to create our hybrid share folder. And this is where we go ahead and hit create. Now, one of the requirements when it comes to setting up a hybrid share folder is that there is a minimum quota of 500 gigabytes. You'll go ahead and need to make sure that within your C2 storage account that you take that into consideration. We'll go ahead and name it ATM. hybrid share and give it that 500 bytes. All right, our hybrid share folder has been created on our C2 storage side. As you could go ahead and see here, 0 devices have been connected. Right now, when it comes to our cloud snapshot side, where that is currently grayed out, I'll go ahead and move on over to signing into one of our Synology NAS devices to go ahead and not only initialize the folder. After we do so, I'll call back at what this snapshot tab does. But we'll go ahead and go over to one of our demo units here. I'm going to go ahead and plug in. So this is mimicking the workflow of one of the remote locations or branches of the BBC Media Action to go ahead and connect their on-prem Synology device over to that C2 storage folder that we just went ahead and created. For those of you who have not seen this before, this is our own OS running on our device that is running through the browser. So we're connecting over the internet. This is what you'll see when you log in. A couple different applications on the side here. But for today, we're just going to go ahead and go to Control Panel. Control Panel is where you configure all the different settings for your on-prem Synology NAS, whether it be creating folders, managing user group permissions, external access, things like that. We'll go ahead and share the folder here. A couple of different folders have been created in this environment. We'll go ahead and click on create and mount hybrid share folder to go ahead and connect to that C2 storage. Let me go ahead and make this a little more clear for you. So this is the hybrid share folder creation wizard. We'll go ahead and click start. And this is where we connect our C2 account, entering in those same credentials that I used to log into C2. Hit allow, and again, it calls out that 500 gigabytes that we've set aside for hybrid share and the total capacity for C2 account. We're going to go ahead and choose the ATM hybrid share folder that we've created, hit OK. And this is where you create your encryption key. You cannot mount a hybrid share folder without an encryption key. Now, when it comes to this encryption key, once you've set it, it cannot be recovered. So make sure that you have that on hand and know it so that you can go ahead and use that encryption key. We'll go ahead and set the one for here. So again, just calling out that it cannot be modified once created, and there is no way to recover the key. Once I hit yes, you'll notice that the browser has automatically downloaded the encryption key, so you'll want to make sure that you set that aside as best as possible off of the computer on like an external USB drive or something like that to make sure that you have it on hand. You'll only need to do this once, and I'll show once we go ahead and mount the hybrid share folder on a second NAS device that we don't need to configure the encryption key, but we'll need to use it. I'll go ahead and hit next here. So for the local cache, this is where you get that fast local storage of hybrid share. Best practice is that you set your local cache size based on the actual usage of data in regular 2 weeks of workflow for you to be able to reap the full benefits of hybrid share. We're just going to go ahead and leave this as a default for today. And this is just to confirm the settings, hit next. And you go ahead and also manage the for the folder itself. We're going to hit done. And as you can see here, our ATM hybrid share folder has now been connected to the Synology NAS, one particular branch in regards to the scenario that we're working with. Okay. If we go back to Synology C2, fresh here. we'll notice that one device has been connected, and we can go ahead and enable snapshots to make sure that we have versioning of the folder on the cloud side. So now we're going to go ahead and log into a different NAS, mimicking, again, a second or another branch that's going to go ahead and wanting to connect to this hybrid share folder. Here, logging in with my credential. And it's pretty much, again, the exact same process to be able to connect, except that we don't have to configure the encryption key. We'll just be entering it into the device here. Shared folder, create, mount hybrid share here, start. Going to ask for those same exact credentials that we entered in before. I've already logged into this particular NAS device, so it knows the C2 account. We're going to hit allow, next, and then here is that same exact hybrid share folder showing that the original device has been connected. Hit that, okay. And then this is where we entered that encryption key. So this is where the process differs once you go ahead and initialize the hybrid share folder on another device. Settings here. So if any particular, and now that the folder has been connected, any data that has been added on the other device or even this device will automatically update on the other device or even on the cloud side, which mimics that specific overall workflow. Now I'm going to go back to the PowerPoint here, because there is another feature that we do have when it comes to our devices, and that's through Synology Drive, where you can access all of the folders, all the data within that hybrid share folder, and essentially sync it across multiple devices, whether it be your phone or your desktop, have one or two-way syncing within your File Explorer or Finder if you are on a Mac. So let's go ahead and jump back into our demo environment on one of our NAS devices to go ahead and quickly run through what that looks like. Go to second device that we connected to. And if we go ahead and look at the Synology Drive admin console, this essentially gives you more information on which devices are syncing data from the NAS to various different devices such as other Synology NAS, desktop clients, or mobile. As you can see here, we're going to go ahead and want to go into team folder and use the functionality to be able to enable the hybrid share folder that we just created so that we can go ahead and make sure that we can access the data from anywhere that we're traveling as long as there's internet. And as you can see here, ATM hybrid share has already been enabled. Let me go ahead and show you what the process of is enabling it. It's pretty simple. Click on the folder, hit enabled. This is where you are able to show or enact various version control or rotation policies when it comes to making sure that you have multiple versions, local versioning on all of that data that has been pulled from the cloud locally. I'm going to go ahead and hit OK. Yes. Hit OK again. Now that that has been enabled, we can go ahead and click on the actual Synology Drive application here. And this is what that looks like when you are accessing Synology Drive through the web browser. We'll go ahead and click team folder. And as you can see here, you could see the ATM hybrid share folder that has been created, and as well as the other folders that have been enabled through the Synology Drive admin console. CAD file demo, sales, test 3. Those same folders have been enabled on this admin console as well. There's more functionality that Synology Drive has that we may not, we just don't have enough time to get through today. But when it comes down to hybrid share or Synology Drive, If you're wanting to get started and test this environment, specifically with hybrid share, feel free to go ahead and contact sac_field at synology.com if you're interested on learning a trial program or trying that program and kind of test it within your environment itself. We took a lot of time today to look at the software side of things when it comes down to Synology, but if you're wanting to um, look at the full range of our overall products, we have anything from desktop storage, hybrid storage that has a couple of different series under it, as well as our niche units, whether it be all flash or our high density unit that has 60 bays in a 4U device. If you're wanting a more concrete time for, to talk with me or my team or any of our overall account managers, feel free to go ahead and use the QR code here to book a demo, whether it be about hybrid share, Synology Drive, or any other application that you're familiar within our ecosystem. We could definitely go ahead and set aside some time to talk more one-on-one with you guys for what would be the best fit for, the problem that you're looking to go ahead and solve. Thank you so much for, again, taking the time to watch this webinar. Now we'll go ahead and open to questions. But again, thank you so much for taking the time. I really do appreciate that. We're going to go ahead and move it over to our moderator to facilitate that.
Okay. So we do have a poll up here while we see what questions we have coming in. And I do want to mention especially that in the handouts from Synology, we also have the full deck, which we don't often have. So a lot of times, you guys are looking for the deck that you just saw, and we don't have the deck for you, but we have other handouts. But Synology's got the full deck there, including a QR code for for learning more and things like that. So definitely check that out. So we do have some questions here for Mark. Mark, hey, you ready for some questions?
Yeah, definitely.
All right, super. So the first one, they're asking, why would I use hybrid share instead of just using Drive?
Yeah, so when it comes just in regards to hybrid share in general, one of the big benefits is when you're working with different or just large files in general or a large amount of data on a week-by-week basis. You don't need to store everything on your local on-prem devices. You would be able to kind of have a smaller footprint that way. It's also a great way to give overall access to either remote teams, things like that, take a little bit of load off your local bandwidth, things like that, so that you would be able to kind of set things up to C2 and then free up storage on your local device as well.
Okay, super. That makes a lot of sense. How's hybrid share managed by the admin?
When it comes to hybrid share, it's really managed in a number of different ways. Primarily two. One is done through the Synology Drive admin console, where you can set things up in terms of bandwidth, overall settings, but really by the NAS or the on-prem device that you have in regards to user permissions, groups, certain access to certain applications, things like that. So it's really under your control. When you're using one of our devices, we give you all the tools to be able to lock things down as need be, just to make sure that everything is secure as well.
Okay. Yeah, and speaking of management and control, how do you recover data if one of the hybrid share offices goes down?
Yeah, in regards to that, right, we're, as I think the demo was about to show, is really you're connecting your on-prem store to, where the files live, primarily in the cloud. So if one of those remote sites goes down, you would still be able to access the cloud directly and pull files from there, since that's where they're primarily housed. We're just kind of giving you that local cache on-prem. So it's really just as simple as going to your C2 account and accessing the storage there.
Okay, gotcha. And Paul is wondering, with Synology's hybrid share and sync, can the data being shared and synced be encrypted?
Yes, correct. So the connection, the encryption itself, or sorry, the connection to C2, there is an option for an encryption, and there is an encryption key required when you are mounting the local unit to the C2 cloud storage. So encryption is by default needed to set that up.
Okay. All right. Great.
Yeah.
And is there an encryption algorithm that you guys use?
Yeah, I believe it's AES 256-bit in regards to the encryption that we use.
Okay, super. And Bishal says Synology C2 UI is awesome. He really likes the UX. So thanks for that feedback, Bishal. And I wanted to ask just about, is there a sort of a sweet spot in terms of, size of organization or, size of data? I know you guys have a lot of different, options as far as models and sizes. I wonder if we could talk about that a little.
Yeah, so, one of the things when you come to us and come to, our team, whether it be our East Coast, West Coast, sales team, we really work with whoever we talk to and understanding, what are your needs on-prem and in the cloud, or really what your overall goals are for your deployment. As we have our desktop units, as you saw by the diagrams, but also we have full rack units that can either be deployed in your data centers, that you are working with, or even some co-locations as well. So it's not like a one-size-fits-all. We really want to make sure that we understand your goals, your data needs, and kind of project that out for the next 3 to 5 years to make sure that you have enough on-prem or cloud storage from what you're wanting to, from when we have that conversation.
Okay. All right. Great. Yeah, and another thing I wanted to ask is, are there sort of, key verticals, that you guys sort of have, a lot of synergy with, or is it?
Yeah, we're currently, and to kind of speak to my team here, on my specific team is in charge of a couple different verticals, such as media entertainment, manufacturing. We also have an education and government team, which are really prominent, and a legal team. So we're kind of able to find solutions for a number of different types of businesses, and we're able to kind of connect with them. So we have a good understanding of what certain software or what even certain devices would best fit this particular type of business, this particular type of vertical, since really, what we're trying to do is, and what we truly believe in, is that we're able to fit into your overall infrastructure depending on what you are looking to accomplish.
Okay, fantastic. Last question for you, just, if somebody wants to get started with Synology, what do you recommend?
Yeah, it really depends. A lot of people start with our smaller, desktop units in regards to personal use. A lot of people start off with deploying one of our 2 4-bay NASs at home, and then later kind of bring that to, their organizations to deploy larger rack units, things like that. So it's really what you want to accomplish. We have a lot of different products that would be able to fit, a number of different needs, a wide variety. But definitely checking out our website, seeing what's new is really good. Or, on the slide deck, we have an email that you can kind of reach out to, and we could really just give you a lot of educational sessions, demos of not only our products, but, we love showing the software. One of the biggest things that, we pride ourselves on is our free OS that gives you a lot of different backup applications to make sure that your data is protected, and also collaboration, as what we did for BBC Media Action and a number of different companies.
Okay, super. Well, Mark Anthony, thank you so much for coming on, giving us an update on Synology, and for your insights here in the Q&A. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
All right, and just a quick reminder about that handout section. There is the download of the PDF of the PowerPoint, where you can get that email address and QR code for more information. Okay, and it's time for our first prize drawing of the day. The winner of our first $300 Amazon gift card is Arpit Kale from California. Arpit Kale. So congratulations to Arpit. we'll be in touch about claiming your prize. And now it's time for our next presentation in the monitoring and optimizing a hybrid cloud, EcoCast, and this session comes from Pure Storage. Presenting for Pure is Mike Nelson, I'm having a bit of tongue-tiedness here today, technical evangelist for Fusion and Flash Array. So I'm going to turn things over to Mike.
Greetings, everyone, and my name is Mike Nelson. I am a technical evangelist at Pure Storage. I'm going to be talking to you a little bit about hybrid cloud and storage as code. Now, you probably had a lot of discussion today, conversations around, hybrid cloud and what that means from an optimization, monitoring, workload standpoint, even, how to move things around, back things up, all that kind of stuff. I'm going to take a little bit of different approach. I'm going to be talking about building that bridge, between your on-premises data centers and the clouds, depending on whatever cloud you use, and then going so far as to talk about how we can actually have a back end for storage that allows you to actually provision storage at infinite scale and provide it to your users or have it provided to you. All right. So I'm not going to get into a lot of the marketing stuff. I'm going to keep it more technical. And then at the end, hopefully have time for a demonstration. Now, I do know that, we're limited on time. So if you have any questions, please let me know and I'll try and answer them as we go along. So when you think about hybrid cloud, this kind of demonstrates, you have a data center and then you have a couple different colored clouds there, but they're all interconnected. So what do you think about when you talk about hybrid cloud? When I think about it, I think it's more like a bridge. It's something that is in between your on-premises data center and the public cloud. Now, that doesn't mean that whatever you're using, the SaaS application or your workload or even your physical resources like storage and compute aren't in one of those physical locations, but it may be being accessed by a different cloud. I consider that to be hybrid cloud. Now, there are other people that have other definitions, but it all depends on how you were raised in IT, if you will. I was raised as an infrastructure person, and I've kind of progressed into more of an automation person. So to me, that just kind of makes sense. I'd like you to ask yourself the same question. I don't know if anybody's asked you that today, but really, what do you think hybrid cloud really is? And what do you think you want to do with it? Two big questions for you. So I want you to take a look at this from the standpoint of maybe you already have that bridge built. Remember I talked about a bridge between your on-premises and your cloud? Maybe you already have it built. Well, take a look at how this is done. Now, you're just going to have some backhoes come in. You're going to have to tear it all down. All right? And maybe when you tear it down, okay, you're just going to leave it torn down. You're not even actually, thinking about, hey, we're not going to build it in the same spot. We're just going to make it a nice, even road like they did. Well, they didn't get rid of the bridge. They just moved it. And maybe that's what you have to do too. Maybe you just need to move your bridge, to maybe a different cloud provider, maybe, to a managed service provider. It all depends on your situation, but that's just one way to think about it, is maybe you need to move it. Now, this next video I want you to look at is, I apologize for all the flashes, but it really is a great time-lapse video of building a bridge from scratch. And I mean, from the ground up, if you will, but it's actually from the water up. But take a look at it. All the architecture, all the detail, all the complexity that's involved in this. You're going to have the same thing when you're talking about the hybrid cloud. If you're building this from scratch, okay, from 0.0 or even, 0.10 out of 50, you still have to, understand that it's not going to be easy. And really, it's a standpoint of maybe, you think of different ways of doing things, but at the same time, you always fall back on what you know, okay, and what other people, consult you on or tell you. But think about this. You're building it, and you're going to have those two meet together, right? That bridges all of your resources from one to the other, all right? And it allows you to move workloads. It allows you to take vehicles like you see here and actually travel across that bridge. Workloads can travel across that bridge, all right? Now, the only thing is you have to have that back end that supports that. You have to have a back end that's that understands what you're trying to do and how you're trying to do it. So let me take a different look at this. Now, this is a railroad bridge, and they're going to actually tear it down, but I want you to watch on how they rebuild it, okay? Because it's really kind of cool. So they're tearing it down. Think of this, again, your own data center. See how they tear it down? And then they bring in these footings. Now watch them slide these footings in, big concrete footings, and now they just take this big prefabricated bridge and slide it into place. It's kind of like a Lego. They slide it in, it locks into place, and then they put dirt and concrete on top of it and then lay the tracks down. Okay, that's awesome. I mean, think about how efficient that is. You could do the same efficiency when you're building, your hybrid cloud, as long as you have the back-end infrastructure to help you support it. So we are an on-demand culture. This is not only in IT, this is everything in life when you think about it. Agility is the bottom line, right? Desire for capacity is infinite. It really is. A lot of people don't care about the back end anymore. They think it's a commodity. All they think about is that I need it and it better be there. Okay. So desire for capacity, storage is growing at an unprecedented rate. Demand for resources via API or just in a few clicks. So this is where we get into the separation of UI versus API, right? And when I talk about this, I want to emphasize this because what I'm going to be talking about from a storage aspect is really API based, okay? Talking directly to the storage and still having a little UI that you can work with, but mainly going through the API. Users have no interest in the underlying hardware components, like I said, and add-ons for protection, analytics are instantly accessible. Take it beyond that. What we've been talking about all day, add-ons for what? Monitoring, optimization, all instantly accessible. All right. All this means huge pressure on the teams that are building this, huge pressure on IT, and especially on like storage teams, on networking teams, on compute teams, you name it, to come up with this, to come up with a viable solution, a solid solution, okay, and a really, really efficient one. So we're going to focus on storage here. Obviously, we're a storage company, so I'm going to focus on that a little bit. This is how it happened yesterday, and it's still happening today, right? Storage requires manual intervention. The scale is restricted. Adjusting to unpredictable performance requirements is impossible. It really is. Hardware refreshers require service outages. How many folks still have arrays that have dual controllers, but they still require, that one controller to remain active that is a little on shaky ground because it's so old that something could happen to it while this other one is going through maybe a 3-hour upgrade. I've been through those. And what about the single controllers? What about the ones that say, oh, we don't need a dual, controller because, we're just that good? I would dispute that. So really, having that resiliency is critical to avoid outages. So when we talk about this, we're going to talk about Pure Fusion, which is Pure's product. We bring a cloud operating model to the enterprise storage as a tagline that we use. But really, when you think about it, Fusion is providing a storage as code, service at infinite scale in the cloud. There's self-service, we're autonomous, like I said, limitless scale. Instant self-service, think about where you could use this. Having self-service where folks would actually come to you and say, I just need this storage. You are tired of allocating this storage, of going and creating things and allocating it and sending it. You want them just to be able to do it themselves, Then we have to start thinking about, on the right-hand side here is a cloud operating model. Anywhere that you have storage, you have to start thinking the mentality of a cloud operating model. Think like a cloud provider. Think like they would think. Hey, I've got all this underlying hardware and I need to pre-configure it and manage it and scale it in order to match the needs of my customers or my users, right? So this mentality, really, when you're talking about hybrid cloud, you have to have this mentality. All right. Intelligent workload management is another thing. Workloads are huge when you're talking about working with SQL databases or anything like that. You need to have some intelligence built around that. So rapid automated deployment, this is where we get into the APIs. This is where you're talking strictly storage as code directly to the APIs for the provisioning and the consumption. All right. So Pure is 100% API. You take them through being able to do this in an automated fashion using platforms or SDKs. The platforms, Ansible, Terraform, Python, could be, other things, pure REST calls, if you like it that way. But API communication really moves you into the next step of being able, to move on your journey of automation. And that's when I'll get into my preaching, if you will, of automation. I give a lot of talks during the year, and I always say automate, automate, automate. It is critical to move on to automation. A few years ago, back 10 years ago, a lot of folks were, worried about automation, kind of like they were worried about robots in the day. Automation is, something that is really key today in IT. You can't get along without it. Really, you can't. Technology moves so fast, you have to be able to automate it. Look at CI/CD pipelines. Look at, scripting. Look at, the ability to automate the, provisioning of VM. That's all automation. So automate, 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 and you do it with APIs. All right. So the other thing you have to think about here is not only from what you do daily, but also your personal career growth, your career ladder. Maybe your next step is to go from being maybe a system administrator to an automation engineer. All right. Because you get into that automation, all different kinds of automations, it's limitless, really, of what you can do. So it's something to think about. Intelligent workload management, this is where we get into Pure One. Now, people don't know Pure One. Pure One is our control plane in the cloud that allows us to optimize and manage and monitor our FlashArray products in the cloud and Fusion in the cloud. It has AI, so it does driven workload placement automatically. It picks the best storage array, and it changes with the workloads, right? It's all about workloads inside of the Pure One meta. The storage as code platform, I'm not going to delve too deep into this, but there are a couple of key things. Number one, you're a consumer, okay? So a consumer consumes resources that are given by providers. Notice on the provider side, it's all the back-end stuff. It's all the stuff that, creating the arrays, creating the zones, creating, the users themselves. Then the consumers or your customers are the ones that create their own tenant spaces, who allocate their own volumes, or connect their own hosts, okay? The key thing I want you to see here is this workload rebalance in the left corner. I'll go over that in just a second. The user interfaces, again, not going to go through this whole slide, but you'll notice we have our API clients. Again, this applies to anything in hybrid cloud. Being able to talk APIs, okay, in the hybrid cloud is critical. Now, we also have our Pure One GUI. So Fusion is built into the Pure One GUI. It's not, anything near what you can do with the API, because the API, you can do everything, right? But the UI is, limited to a point where you can just do the simple stuff. And that's okay. All right. We'll be expanding on that in the future. But think about it. When you're doing automation, you don't need a UI to do that. Now, just a quick example topology here. You're looking at a couple different data centers, B and C. You see CBS, which is our cloud block store up in the left-hand corner, which is out in Azure or AWS. When you take a look at how the regions are split up, now this is true hybrid cloud, right? You're going between regions. You're actually going within data centers and then out to other data centers. The other key thing to look here is the latency of networks. When you talk about actually moving workloads between clouds, think about it. You have networks to deal with. There's no way around it. Unless you have a dedicated, pipe-to-pipe connection that is solid and it's guaranteed, you have to deal with providers and latency of networks. Okay, that's just the fact of life. So these are all things to take into consideration. Now, when we talk about workload rebalance real quick, on the provider side, you'll see workloads down there, the disk images below the flash arrays, the tenants up above, they're just like, hey, I have my disk. I really don't care what you're doing on the back end. All right. Well, we have these 3 disks down here, these 3 volumes. Okay. And these 3 volumes are sitting on that first array. That first array is saying, whoa, I'm getting really overworked here. Things are really hard for me right now. So could you like move these things over? Our AI engine is taking over saying, we're moving this stuff. Okay. And we're going to do a workload rebalance. We're going to stretch that data across 2 arrays. All right. And eventually get it over to that second array. So now, that first array is saying, okay, I'm cool. Things have really calmed down. But that's all done seamlessly. The users don't even know it happened. Okay. And that is key when you're dealing with hybrid cloud. If you were going to replace, hardware, a CPU, actual physical server, you need to do it so users don't even know. Okay. That's what cloud providers do today. Azure, AWS, they do it so people don't even know. And that's key even with storage. This is really a vision slide. It contains things, that we're working towards, maybe some roadmap stuff. But if you take a look at it, we're talking about all the workloads and how they all connect together. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. I'm running a little bit short of time. But I also have a question. The question from Mohit. Why does Fusion look like it's only for developers? I prefer UI and can't code. So it is not made for developers. It's made for scripters. It's made for automation people. Okay. Developers, they can use it. But it's really made for folks who want to automate things and talk directly to the API level. We still have a UI, so no fear. You can still use that, but it is limited. All right. So it's really not just, hey, this is just for developers. It's for anyone who does automation. Really need to, grasp that and engage yourself working with automation. I don't want to mispronounce your name. Yurisev. I'm sorry. I apologize. How would you move workloads between clouds? Well, that's what we were talking about, is actually being able to use the technology we have, like workload rebalance, to be able to move those, across different arrays. Now, if you're talking about from cloud to cloud, we have the ability with our cloud block store to be able to do that, right? So we can move it from an on-premises up into Azure, maybe go from Azure over to AWS or back to the on-premises. There are multiple ways to do it. Now, remember, once you're out in the public cloud, you're relying on those networks again. Okay. And you're relying on that latency. You're relying on moving that storage. If you had a solution like Fusion as your back end, you don't have to worry about the storage. All right. You don't have to worry about that at all. Okay. Moving on. I know I have one other question I'll get to in a moment. So Fusion really, self-service speed, consistent operations. It scales faster. That's the biggest thing. We just scale to infinite, and more utilization and less cost. Everybody wants less cost, right? I want to point out the consistent operations on the left-hand side here too, because we're talking about human error. We're talking about, having consistent outcomes. Every time you do something, you want it to be the same. You don't want to have the red error message coming up whenever you, create a volume or whenever you move something, a workload. You want it to be consistent. So you always get those green, status messages saying everything was great, successful, awesome. It makes your life a lot easier. So I'm going to hop into a demonstration here of our Fusion product. And if you can hang on here, I'll switch screens. I've got about a minute and a half left. So hold on 1 second. Now, as you can see here, I've got the screen set up side by side with our Pure 1 interface on the right and then a terminal on the left. I'm inside the Fusion tab in Pure 1, showing the infrastructure, storage, protection policies, and tenants. And then from there, we'll also look at the regions. There is nothing defined here. This is an empty setup. So I'm going to actually run the automation scripts. Okay, this is an Ansible to create that infrastructure. I'm going to speed it up because it takes a little while to do that. But once it actually creates all that, you can see it actually being created on the right-hand side inside of Pure 1. So as the automation is talking to the APIs, it is reflecting it inside of the UI. It's creating everything from the availability zones, the network interfaces, the storage endpoints, and even the arrays themselves. It's going through and creating those. Okay. So you can see it all being populated in real time. This is what automation is all about, talking directly to the APIs. You can see we're updating the network interfaces, all the Ethernet interfaces, as well as the iSCSI. So this is just taking into consideration the infrastructure portion. Now, when this is complete, we're going to move over to the actual storage portion. Okay. I have one more question here. Damien, what do people use when they want to show the perf data from the hybrid cloud? Like what software can show graphs, charts, and compare? I mean, I think you mean comparison. Real quick, I'm getting to the storage piece. You can watch it on your screen, but I'll answer his question at the same time. A lot of folks, Damien, actually use things like Prometheus and Grafana. We run into that quite a bit using InfluxDB, using interfaces like that, Elastic as well. But you have to pick and choose, what your flavor is. That's how they actually report, by pulling that raw data in and creating the graphs and charts. So as you can see on the right-hand side, we've created the storage. We've got different types, storage, C. We've got flash with the flash array C, the IOPS limit, the bandwidth limit, size limit. These are all things that you would configure for your consumers or your users. Okay. As we move through, we've different classes. Storage X has also got, a performance tier and an ultra tier. Okay, that allows even faster capabilities. You can see them all listed there. Next, we'll move on to protection policies. Now, protection policies set, your retention, your RPO. How long do you want this retention to hold these volumes? And if you look, they'll start populating here. We look at retention policies that are set up from a DB15, which is a database like database 15, RPO of 15 minutes with a retention of 1 day. Then we go hourly for a week, 1 hour, or 1 week. So you can set that up any way you like. But that's the end of the demo. That is the end of my presentation. Thank you very much. And I hope I answered all your questions. If not, please let me know, and we'll get to them after the presentation. Thank you.
Okay, those time-lapse videos of bridge building at the start of the presentation were so cool. That makes me want to go down a whole internet rabbit hole to find time-lapse videos of various construction projects. I'm no engineer, but I love to see how huge projects like that get built. And I see hours of YouTube time in my future. So Mike took some questions there in the presentation. Looks like we got more questions for Mike and the Pure Storage team, and we'll get those over to the team to get back to you. We do have a poll question for you. Appreciate your feedback on additional resources that you'd like to see from Pure Storage. So thanks to everybody who's already responded to that poll. We appreciate your feedback, and I'll just leave it up here for another few moments, and then we'll move on to our next presentation. I'd also like to remind you all about the handouts. We've got a link from Pure Storage. Be sure to check that out if you'd like some more detail. It's a link to a page on Pure Fusion Storage's code. You can find the announcement. You can see the announcement video. There's an overview, benefits, a demo, other resources, and the solution brief. So, of course, you can get a lot of those things also by just clicking on any resources that you'd like there in the poll. And I'll leave that poll up while we move on to our next prize drawing. The winner of our next $300 Amazon gift card is Christopher Morgan from New Jersey. So congratulations to Christopher Morgan. We'll be in touch about claiming your prize. Okay, well, thanks to Mike Nelson and Pure Storage for a great presentation today and for educating us on Pure Storage. And now we're going to move on to our next great presentation in the Hybrid Cloud EcoCast, and this session comes from AppDynamics. And from AppDynamics, we have Ben Haddix, who's a Global Architect FSO. Ben, welcome to the EcoCast.
Appreciate it. Thank you so much. And thank you all for joining us today. We're going to walk through some of what we're doing at Cisco around full stack observability, what that looks like. So as was mentioned, I am Ben. I am the Global Architect for FSO. And we want to start by talking about customer challenges. What are you seeing that's an issue in your IT infrastructure and with IT operations in general, and how can we help? And those customer challenges, let's be honest, it starts with how do we get our teams to talk to each other? So when we talk about Aptly and Thousand Eyes together, which is just a small part of FSO, we're talking about the ability to have an application developer understand what is going on in the network. Not everything in the network, but just enough to let them know that there is an issue in the network that's affecting their application, or that the application is having an issue and it has nothing to do with the network. And at the same time, we need to be able to enable the network teams to be able to look at their network infrastructure, understand the applications they're supporting, and if there's an issue in the network that's affecting that application, or if there's a call from the application team saying, hey, our application's having issues, it's a network. You as a network engineer can easily say, no, it's not our problem, and we'll show you why. So what are the challenges for apps and network teams and what we're looking at? So those challenges are, internet's a blind spot, so that's a big issue for everybody. I take time to talk about this. I won't use names, but there was a very big billion-dollar company based out of Florida that has a lot of fans, and they had an application that went down. And unfortunately, this application that went down has to do with letting people interact with their business. You can do things like order food, you can make reservations, you can do all sorts of things through this application, and it went down. And on social media, they were getting absolutely lambasted. And the problem was, it wasn't their fault. It was an issue in their cloud hosting where their cloud provider had a huge major outage that went across several regions, and it happened to take down both their main application and the backup systems for the application in one fell swoop. And so a lot of times these third-party systems, including like the internet, tend to be a blind spot for us where we don't understand what's going on. And we have to be able to react to these things, because when third-party systems fail us, or when the internet fails us, it's not the internet or the third party that gets the blame. It's us. It's us that are trying to provide these applications and services to our clients. Those are the people that get the blame. So being able to understand how these things are interacting so we can make the changes on the fly and be more proactive than reactive is a huge part of this as well. Being able to test the coverage, that requires expertise. And again, coverage from an application and a network standpoint and how we speak each other's language, because that siloed data creates a lot of confusion. If you go in and start talking jitter and all these fun things to an app developer is just going to tell you jitter is when they had too many monsters on a late night trying to hit a project. It doesn't mean the same to a network engineer that does to an app developer. So being able to address these challenges and getting teams talking together is what it's really about. So what's Cisco's solution? So we had Cisco Live last week. We talked a lot about full stack observability. What is full stack observability and where it comes from? And so we have a whole architecture on full stack observability and what that looks like, from extensibility to services for business context, and then the use cases that go on top of that. And so what we're focusing in on right now is this app dependency monitoring and the customer digital experience. How can we understand what the customer is going through or what our clients are going through when they engage us in business through an application, from the time that they start on their mobile device, on their computer, on their laptop, wherever they may be, as they traverse across the internet back into the application to do business. What does that look like? And then the app dependency monitoring, are there third-party systems we are relying on? Whether it's a cloud provider, maybe it's a credit card processing payment center we're getting from a third party. Any of those things that involve that customer digital experience. Now, I will tell you, the customer digital experience monitoring use case, I don't like the name of that because the customers sometimes are employees. When we think about our IT and what we do, a lot of times the applications that we're serving up, it's not just the customer and their digital experience, but it's our employees who may be working from home and have to traverse over that internet to get in and to do their job. And they're just as important as our customers in making sure that the business functions and the business runs the way it can. So those are the two use cases that we're going to focus in on and what we're doing. Now, if you've been familiar with what Apti and Thousand Eyes have done together in the past, we did have this Dash Studio integration we're talking about here on the right. That was a dashboard integration where we were just showing you some stuff from Thousand Eyes and Apti in the same dashboard. But what we have released now is a true bidirectional integration. We're actually taking data from both Thousand Eyes and Apti and putting them together. And not only are we putting that together, we're using some machine learning in the background to do a lot of this out of the box of correlating the things we're monitoring in AppD to the tests we're running in Thousand Eyes, and then also making recommendations of tests that we might want to run in Thousand Eyes against our applications. And it looks like this. Again, it's being able to look at those users and their devices going across the internet back into the application. And then you could actually add a fourth hop on this from the application out to the third-party systems, because those will go across the internet as well. And we need to get some insight onto whether it's a third-party issue or whether it's one of our application issue or even in our network. Because as we start to monitor things from the back end of our application out, we're going to traverse part of our network, and we're going to understand how our network is performing when it comes to that user experience and what's happening. So the bidirectional integration, we're going to be able to reduce MTTR by embedding those metrics, those network metrics in with the application. We're going to take a look at what that looks like. But basically, we're trying to narrow things down for an application team that they don't see everything. We want to narrow it down to be able to say, here's your packet loss, here's your jitter, here's your latency. Those three things, kind of the gold standards. If one of these three things go bad, you're going to have impact to your application, and you need to work with your network team to get it resolved. And we can show you how those function. The reason we boil it down like that is I will tell you a story of a client who told me they were a big network shop, mine is network, and they had application guys calling in because someone had given them access to one of the network tools, and they could see that their application, one of the IPs coming in for their application, was dropping pings. Like the pings were coming in, and he would see every once in a while a ping would drop. And so he kept calling the network team like, hey, my application's not working because it keeps dropping pings. And the network team had to take the time to explain to him that it's not affecting his application, that there were policies in place that allowed, that looked at these pings coming in, and if you hit it too many times, it would look at it as a denial of service attack, and it would shut it down and reset. And then the pings would come in again, and it would hit that threshold, it would shut off. And so they had to take the time out of what they were doing to explain this to an application person. At the same time, the application folks may see an issue, and they have to explain to the network guys, well, this is why it's not an application issue, and kind of go through the development and how calls work and the methods and everything that's running in for the code, and why they're running different things in parallel for this database while calling out to a third party and how it all works together. And so we want to be able to reduce that down into its bare minimums where an application team can look at it and say, yep, that's definitely a network issue. I need to talk to the network team, or a network team can look at it and say, no, that's definitely an application issue. That's not us. So that is how we're reducing that MTTR, streamlining those workflows, again, with actionable recommendations, being able to look at everything and say, here's a test we think you should be running against your applications that you're already monitoring. And then prioritizing those network remediations. Because if we can see the applications and along with the network that's supporting them, we can start to understand where the business critical value is, that we can prioritize what the network teams go out and work on. If it's some back-end cron job that's being affected, compared to it's a front-end ordering system where our customers are ordering things. We might want to focus on that front-end system and the network that supports that. And so we have to be able to correlate those things together in order to prioritize what we're doing. So with that, correlating those network insights, you can see here where we're starting to pull those thousandized metrics in: the latency, the jitter, the packet loss. Just 3 base metrics to allow the network or the application team to see, is this issue with the application, is it with the network? At the top, above where we have highlighted those network metrics, you'll see a lot of end user metrics that the application team can see. Things like the response time, breaking it out by geo, understanding what devices they're running on. So they can get a holistic view of how that application's running, what the user experience looks like, and now they can understand how the underlying network and the internet is affecting that user experience. Even to the point of, it could be as important as you may have SLAs or SLOs with your internet service provider and your business on the uptime and the quality of the throughput. Because as we know on the network side, the idea of the 99.99999% uptime is a thing of the past. Nobody cares about that uptime. What they care about is the quality of that uptime. And there are going to be a lot of SLAs and SLOs that are based around that. So being able to tie those things together, correlate them so you can understand, become very big. Now on the flip side, when we start to get to the network side, we start to make recommendations of tests. So again, as I mentioned earlier, there's some machine learning and things that go on in the back end that allow, when you set up the integration, you're allowing the AppD platform to talk to the thousandized platform. And they start comparing things like domain names, IPs, all these different things. And they can start to see the applications that you're monitoring from a real end user perspective and correlate that to the synthetic tests that you've set up in ThousandEyes that are going across the internet. And they can start to match those up. And if we find an application you're monitoring in AppD, but there's no test associated to it on the ThousandEyes side, we can make recommendations to say, you're not testing the internet connection and the network coming into this application. Would you like to set that test up? So it makes it easy, not only from a network side, but also from an application owner side. If they'd like to see that test, they don't have to figure out how everything's going on. We tell them how to set that up. And again, all of that is in a pre-configured test template, and it's intelligent recommendations based on the data that we're collecting across. And then also being able to start to tie that network performance and those tests to application services. And this is where we get into the third-party dependencies. Because again, looking at the data coming in from AppD, looking at these applications, we start to see these services that you're calling out to, these third-party services. And we can start to correlate the tests that you're running in ThousandEyes to those third-party services. You can start to understand things and issues that are going on. And we produce these dashboards where we can show you, hey, there's an issue calling out to this third-party service, and there's a degradation. It has to do with the network underneath of it, or there's an issue with this third-party service, but the network and connectivity to it is fine. It's actually the service itself. This is the kind of data when you're trying to call into these third-party services and troubleshoot, that if you have this data available to say, no, look, we can show you where we're calling in. It's only taking us, 25, 30 milliseconds to get from our back end to your front end, but then there's a service degradation on availability or in the time that it's taking for information to come back. That helps eliminate a lot of the finger pointing or even looking in the wrong places on what things are going wrong, to help narrow it down to say, no, this is definitely on your side. Can you please take a look at it? And here's why. So these are all the things that we're starting to do from a broader perspective of bringing these things together. So again, being able to look at things and say, okay, is it an application problem? Is it a network problem? And how can we bridge that gap so that application guys don't have to be network experts, And network folks don't have to be application experts, but they can still talk the same language. They can still see a single source of truth, and they can learn to work together and talk together to tackle bigger problems and bigger issues and start to work for business outcomes and not just fighting fires. So that is our presentation on AppDE, Thousand Eyes, and their integrations and how they play in the bigger role of full stack observability and all that. And I believe we are going to look to see if there are any questions.
Yeah, absolutely. And Ben, let me just quickly put up a poll question here for anybody who'd like to get some more information about the App Dynamics solution. But Ben, I what you said about we get to blame not the internet or the third-party provider. That's so true, and I love this this idea of providing full stack observability. I wonder if you can go into some of the ways that with the integration, Thousand Eyes and AppD are better together. I imagine there are a lot of customers who have one or the other and maybe use somebody else for an integration or considering somebody else for an integration. I mean like for the other function. But when you use those two Cisco products together, what are if you could net out some of the ways that you really get an advantage as a customer?
Yeah. So, I mean, the first advantage obviously is the fact that because they're both Cisco, we can do things like build these integrations where you start to get those auto recommendations. We can dive deep into the data and start to say, okay, we can correlate things automatically. It becomes less of a hassle to set up where you're trying to manually go in. So if things change on the back end, you don't have to worry about changing things in your integration, that we're automatically going to see those and correlate things together. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, again, being able to have those teams talk together and even understand how third-party services start to play a role. Gone are the days of an application and a network where I compare it to home cooking. Like, you used to be able to just go in and, mom or dad or grandma or grandpa, someone would cook a dinner and you'd be like, this is amazing. How'd you make the mashed potatoes? How'd you cook the steak? How did you make the salad? And they could tell you everything that was going on. And, when applications and networks first came out and you start going back like into the 90s and stuff, you would have one or two guys, you just go to them and say, hey, how'd you make this application? Why'd you set the network up this way? And they could tell you. But with Agile and Scrum and now like the advent of cloud and microservices and all these things coming out, it's more like fast food. It's, if you have like 15 people making a hamburger, one guy's in charge of the bun, one guy's in charge of cooking the burger, one guy puts the pickles on, one guy puts the ketchup on, and you have all these different things that happen. And then people start using their own things. One guy's like, spicy ketchup's the newest thing. I'm going to use spicy ketchup. And the pickle guy's like, oh no, like, these super sour pickles are the new thing right now. So they put, and the next thing you know, the burger comes out and the customer's like, this is not what I ordered. So being able to put the two together where everybody's talking together and they understand how their jobs work together. And, we do nothing in a vacuum. If I make a change on the application side, does it affect the network? Am I pushing too much data through? Am I overwhelming certain segments? Or if I'm on the network side and I upgrade a firmware, how's that affecting how the application works and functions from a customer standpoint? So those are the reasons why we put these together and kind of those advantages that you start to get and reap as a client when you put these things together.
Very cool. Another one here, if we're already using App Dynamics and Thousand Eyes, can I use the integration right now?
Yeah. So the only thing you need for the integration, there's a license called an end user monitoring peak license from App Dynamics. If you're running that license, then you can set up the integration right now. You just go in, point them together, and they'll start talking and doing their thing. But that's the only requirement, is that you have that end user monitoring peak license, which gives you the access to pull in that data from Thousand Eyes across into AppD and vice versa. On the AppD side, you don't need, or on the ThousandEyes side, you don't need anything additional. You'll just be able to run that integration.
Okay. All right. Very cool. Another question just about that integration. They're wondering, is this a full integration between AppDynamics and ThousandEyes?
It is not a full integration in this aspect. We're not pulling all of the data from ThousandEyes across into AppD, and we're not pulling all of the data from AppD into ThousandEyes. And that goes back to, I don't need an application engineer or developer trying to understand the entire network infrastructure. They don't need to. They just need to be able to understand the components that affect what they're trying to do. And so the integration was built in a way that the data we're pulling across and the analysis we're giving is focused in to help the application owner understand the network, and to help the network engineers understand the application components that they're supporting. Outside of that, a network engineer doesn't need to understand how long a call or method is taking to run. Like you said, application person doesn't need to understand from a network side, how two different routers or switches are talking to each other, or what segment paths are things running down. Those things are immaterial to those personas. So we're not going to pull all that data across. We're going to pull what's relevant to that persona that will help them do their job faster and quicker.
Okay. All right, great. Another question here comes from Paul, who's wondering, where and how does AIOps fit into Cisco's full stack observability platform?
This is actually a fantastic question. We get this a lot. So, Paul, I appreciate this. When we look at Cisco's full stack observability and what we're doing, there's full stack observability fits inside of AIOps. And so what I mean is, when you look at Cisco's full stack observability, what we're doing is we're taking data from many different parts of your IT infrastructure and even your business, and pulling them all into a centralized area, correlated together, and then offered up in the context that you want to see it, whether it's based on persona, based on whatever you want. You've got to be able to see all of that data centralized together. The reason I say it's part of AIOps, because AIOps is much bigger than just the technology. The technology is just a small part of that. The reality of this, and I think sometimes as technologists, we forget about the business side, that technology is easy. People and processes are hard. Excuse me, they're hard. And so when we start to implement these things, there are still processes on how do we handle problem tickets that come through that maybe stretch across 2 or 3 different silos? Or how do we support a business KPI that may involve 3 or 4 different businesses within IT? So those processes and the way we handle this new idea of having all this data correlated together, those are just as important. And that's where AIOps really comes in, because building AI on top of things is one thing. It's like you get all the data together, I can build AI on top of it. That's fantastic. What do I do with it? How do I use it to enhance what's already being done in my business? Or how do I use it to accelerate what's being done in my business? And how do I handle those processes? Those are the things that really make AIOps successful. I tell people, technology is easy. People processes are hard. So just think of Cisco's full stack observability as a way to centralize all of your data correlated together to help accelerate and enhance your broader and greater AIOps strategy within IT and the business.
Okay. Well, Ben, you've been really generous with your time here in your Q&A. I do just want to ask one other question. If people are interested in this, what do you recommend that they do as a next step or to get started?
Yeah, next step. Reach out to your Cisco AM. Reach out to your Cisco rep. Ask about full stack observability. We have workshops that we can run, which is really nice. for multiple reasons, but the workshop we run, it's a 2 days, half day each day, where we take your business KPIs, we work with your teams, we understand your business and your business KPIs, and then we understand where the data is and how that ties together, and we come back with not only a solution, but an understanding of showing you how your IT and what you're doing in your IT infrastructure and your IT side of the house actually correlates and enhances and supports your business outcomes that the business is driving for the next 2 to 5 years. And so I know a lot of clients out there struggle with that. So even being able to do that, even if you didn't buy a single thing, at least you get that understanding and further down the road in your observability journey of understanding how IT is supporting your business and your specific business KPIs. So reach out to your Cisco AMs, AppD or Thousand Eyes AMs. Ask them about full stack observability, if they can do a workshop, how to get started, and even look at doing some proof of values on this and some demos and see it in action in your environment.
Okay. All right. Well, Ben, thanks for the update on Cisco's full stack observability and on this integration between Thousand Eyes and AppD. This has been great. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, and now it's time for our final presentation in the Monitoring and Optimizing a Hybrid Cloud EcoCast. And this session comes from Progress Software. And presenting for Progress is Jason Alberino, who's a Senior Product Manager there. Jason, welcome to the EcoCast.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Glad to have you. Yeah, take it away.
Sure. So let's dive right into it. I got a lot of slides and not much time, so I'm going to get right to it. Let's go to my introduction. I'm Jason Alberino. Well, I'm actually Principal Product Manager. You introduced me as Senior. That's okay. I am known as the What's Up Gold Ninja as well. The reason for that is I've been in the infrastructure monitoring space for over 20 years now. I started out as a customer. Obviously, I was a customer of a certain product, and I ended up being product manager of said product eventually. So a lot of experience within IT environments, configuration, and infrastructure monitoring space in general. So with that, we'll get right to the agenda. I won't stay on this slide too long, but basically we're going to tell a story here about how you go from monitoring to the best type of monitoring, which we're calling customized monitoring, and hopefully have some time for Q&A at the end. So before we get into that, let's talk about the challenges that IT operators face a little bit. And really what this comes down to is it's difficult to keep track of everything. There's constantly things changing in every network. Any network that is in production has changes happening constantly. Think about security landscape of today and patches, software updates. Things change. Sometimes things get blocked. There's so many things to consider on top of all the normal job responsibilities that someone has in the IT operations space. You're expected to have 99.9999% uptime at the same time while accounting for all of these ongoing changes in the environment. Now, with that, the business challenge is laid out here, right? So an application or service becomes unavailable, people can't work. Not only that, your customers then have a negative experience. Research shows that customers hitting an unavailable service, they're much less likely to return ever again, and that can damage your revenue and reputation. We did some studies to figure out, well, what does it actually cost the business, right? And these are relative numbers, and you can see the links there to back up the statistics. But it comes down to not only is it lost time for your employees, the business loses money with every single outage. So with that being said, let's talk about the non-automated detection approach. So I've encountered a lot of different customers in the past that were trying to do this all by hand, manually logging into systems, trying to write their own scripts, spending an enormous amount of time. And it's at one point, yeah, it was possible, but it's certainly not sustainable. As networks continue to grow, new services get introduced, and the scripted-based approach that I've seen people take, what if that person leaves the company? you're left holding the bag trying to figure out how do I maintain this going forward. So the general idea here is you don't want to do it all by hand. With that, I want to talk about discovery intelligence a bit, a term we're trying to define more here, and I actually have a definition written out directly on the slide. Really what it comes down to is a system that can make decisions for you, but also take input based on what you know about your systems. So it's one thing to identify things automatically. It's another thing to identify things automatically and apply all the proper monitoring information along with it, customized to your specific environment. Not only that, it's important that this is ongoing. Since networks are always changing, it's important to have the discovery be scheduled or be run on demand every so often. But the most important piece of this is the customizability. Every network is different. Even the same make and model in different environments operate differently. I can say this from experience. I've seen it many times. That being said, let's shift to the landscape and the evolution of IT infrastructure monitoring. So I gave the example of no monitoring or non-automated detection, right? So we're going from low context and manual to high context and automated on one axis, and on the other you see going from nothing to reactive. Discovery intelligence kind of lives in the middle between out-of-the-box monitoring and customized monitoring, and we'll talk about those a little bit more here. Before I start talking about those, I'm going to just mention that the discovery intelligence process here is really iterative. So yes, it starts with initiating a scan, collecting data, and returning results, and making some decisions with those results. But it doesn't end there. It's continuous because networks are ever growing all the time, ever changing. So now let's talk a little bit about out-of-the-box monitoring, and what do I mean by that? And really it's things that are available directly after installation with a product. A lot of products call them different things, sensors, monitors, elements, whatever it may be. It comes down to availability and performance. And a vast majority of products should be offering the basics here directly out of the box, no customization necessary. It really just saves you time to make sure you are monitoring best practices directly out of the box. Now, what do I mean by best practices, right? So what do I monitor? Well, when it comes to network systems, routers, switches, firewalls, access points, things along those lines, you want to look at everything you can from the availability perspective. Their interface utilization especially is important. You can look at the status of each and every interface on that system, right? So it all comes down to what is critical to your environment. In certain environments, you may need to monitor everything, and others, some aspects of that system may not be as important, right? But you start with what's best to monitor on those systems is the point. On to operating systems, well, it comes down to, it depends on what it is, right? At the very least, you're talking about CPU, disk, memory utilization, as well as, making sure the device is responsive. And with cloud systems, it's really, connectivity, right? Can your systems go access that cloud resource? And that's, best practice. In terms of scalability, performance, those things can come in later. And when we talk about servers, you really want to make sure you're looking at all of the aspects of that hardware. It's critically important is disk health, and I've seen this many times out in the wild. Failed disks can lead to bad outages. I'm lucky enough to been through a double RAID 5 disk failure. One of my storage admins out there can relate, I'm sure. That being said, those are the best practices, right? But there's also some things to avoid when it comes to best practices. I've written out 6 here just from experience. False positives, right? Getting an alert and going and checking on said alert and everything's working as expected. The mistake here is you need to do something about that, right? So whatever system you have should be configurable in a way that allows you to increase timeouts. Let's say you expect a slower response from certain systems, for example. And it relates to the overly aggressive settings, right? So depending on the system, they might have polling cycles, some sort of data retention. You want to make sure it's in line with what your business requires, not necessarily going overly aggressive with said data. alert storms, right? So the system should be able to avoid alert storms in some sort of way. A perfect example of this is, let's say, a router at a remote site becoming unavailable, thus all the systems behind that router are unavailable. Having one alert in that situation is much preferable to hundreds, if not thousands, depending on the size of your environment. So let's talk about some other things here. I'm not going to get into all these issues just due to time. Please ask questions if you have them. Let's talk about customized monitoring. That's why I'm excited to be here today. What is customized monitoring? It's really just the ability to make adjustments to your system. As mentioned earlier, that could be monitors, sensors, elements, whatever you want to call it in terms of how you get the information. But that also includes notifications and corrective actions, actually fixing the problem, as well as that discovery intelligence. The extensibility of the system is more important than ever nowadays due to the ever-changing landscape of IT operations and the introduction of new services, microservices, etc. There's a sprawl of systems all over the place. But really, remember, we're talking about this IT operator in the end. How are they supposed to accommodate for everything, right? They need to begin automating resolutions to issues. So just some more specific examples of what you can customize. Remember, I gave some best practices, but you could also look at things like SSL certificates. Even Google, Facebook, all the big players have had outages related to SSL certificate expiration. That's embarrassing. You can monitor for that, right? But also, services, processes, maybe REST APIs, applications you use. It depends on your environment. But that discovery intelligence, again, it's not just a matter of telling it which monitors to assign to which types of devices. You can create rules around how to detect certain things. It's future-proof in that sense. Even as long as the connectivity is there and we support said protocols, the system should be able to define new objects as they become available very easily. Down to the actions and automated resolutions, I gave an example earlier, but I can give a more specific one. Well, when I was in sysadmin back in the day, I had a data domain appliance that needed to run a command dd clean every so often, depending on how much space was available. By automating that process, I saved myself over an hour of time. And every single thing that you automate ends up saving more and more time, which is increasingly important considering what's expected from an IT operator. I'm not going to dig into too much more. If you have questions, please ask them. I want to talk about an inbound REST API just slightly, and really just defining what it is. It's some sort of way to enable an integration, either displaying data from your system on some other system, or maybe automatically taking action in the system. For example, a new virtual machine automatically being monitored as soon as it's done being provisioned. So bringing this all together, now I will talk about what is WhatsUp Gold. You may be noticing some of the screenshots along the way. WhatsUp Gold is an infrastructure monitoring solution that automatically discovers and maps everything in your environment, including those dependencies. It's easy to use in terms of customizability as well. So we're covering the best practices directly out of the box, but it's also very extensible based on what the requirements are within your environment. I will talk about how to learn more a little bit. Just go whatsupgold.com/trial, or you could try it yourself. whatsupgold.com/demo. There's a interactive demo available as well as a video. So some key takeaways before I wrap up here. Really, it comes down to you are expected nowadays to customize your monitoring in some sort of way. No solution can cover every single scenario directly out of the box that can cause an outage in your environment. So it's important that whatever system you adopt has some sort of way to be customized, and ease of customization is also important. When it comes to fine-tuning things within your environment, that's probably the most important thing. Every single network is unique and could require different settings. There is no one-size-fits-all when it comes to complex networks. With that, I will wrap up here and go to questions as possible, regardless of the size of the organization.
Okay. All right. Excellent. You know, and I think, Jason, we're coming up on time here, but you know, any sort of closing thoughts for people? You know, you mentioned places to get started. You know, any other advice for people on you know, getting going with progress?
No, just check out the solution. It's well worth it in terms of value. We pride ourselves on, you know, reaching out directly to customers and working with customers to build the best solution possible with them. You can find out more on whatsupgold.com, and I'm excited to talk about our customer validation program, which you could become a member of if you purchase a license. So
Okay.
Thank you.
Excellent. Well, thanks very much, Jason. Really appreciate your time and the update on progress and on What's Up Gold. And thanks to everybody who's filled out the poll. We'll go ahead and close that up. And it's time for our final prize drawing. And so the winner of the last of the $300 Amazon gift cards is Gita Suku from Illinois. So congratulations to Gita. We'll be in touch about claiming your prizes. If you were watching the event today and thinking this type of event would be the ideal platform to tell folks about your platform or solution, we'd love to hear from you to help determine which of our hundreds of events each year would be a good fit for you. Contact us at connect@actualtechmedia.com. And I'd also like to point out that we've got another great event coming up on Thursday. This is a megacast on devising cloud strategies and solutions. This one starts at noon Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific. You can see we've got a fantastic lineup of companies who are going to be there to tell you all about their solutions. So check that out and certainly attend if that applies to you. We'd love to see you there. So with that, on behalf of the Actual Tech Media team, I do want to thank all of our presenters today for putting together such great presentations and demos and all of their insights in the Q&A today. So that's Synology, Pure Storage, App Dynamics, and Progress Software. And finally, last but not least, we'd like to thank all of you for attending today's EcoCast from Actual Tech Media and for all of your questions. That concludes today's event. Have a fantastic rest of your day.